Ooh. Ooh, toasty. Feels good. Part 1 of Taylor's 4-seat Sandrail. It really isn't part 1 because it's December and I've been working on this. At least I've been working on the trailing arms and some of the parts since September. So, and even before that, this frame was built by Taylor and my old man 8 years ago or more. This is a project that I'm helping my buddy, a cousin, than an actual friend. This buggy was originally built by him and my dad in my dad's Orem house, and that's where my dad built the majority of his buggies. I don't know how many he built there. It was in the double digits, so no, we're not talking hundreds. But the neat part about this buggy is it was the last one at the Orem house before my dad moved in to my grandma's house in Pleasant Grove. So it's kind of a little bit of a sentimental buggy, kinda. And Taylor at the time, he had a 2-seat Dune Buggie, and still does, but he wanted a 4-seater. It kind of seemed to be the trend we're all going. We all kind of start with a 2-seater. You get the family and then you get the 4-seater. Well, Taylor didn't have the family yet, so he was getting ahead of it on the 4-seater. And they built this frame. When they built it, they used a ball joint front end, and then it just had a factory IRS rear end in it. Built it, and then he took it up to his family farm and let it sit in the field for 8+ years. And over the last 3 years, I've really been hounding on him and bugging him about, hey, just bring it up to my house. I don't have a project in my shop, come bring it here. And it took 3 years, but I finally got it over here. You know, his family's grown to the point where he can't get his family out without a 4-seater, without taking 2 buggies. And so this isn't replacing any of his other buggy, just adding to his fleet. You know, I don't know. I always kind of thought you could never have too many buggies. Talking to the guy that I have 5 of them. Since my dad's passed, he can't be here to help Taylor finish this buggy. And I wouldn't say it's an obligation or as much as a want to. I want to see it cross the line. I want to see it finished. Me and Taylor and my buddy Alex have talked about this, and we've talked about like what he would want to do with this. Like, there was definitely a time where we were trying to talk him into, hey, just get it running with the suspension that's there. You don't get an amazing ride, but you know, it'll be something you can get out with your family. Looking back at it now, it's probably a good thing he didn't take our advice. If we would have left the tranny where it was and used the stock suspension, when it came time for him to do some upgrades and to get some longer travel arms or to go to a longer travel beam front suspension, we would have had to cut out a lot. Contemplating just getting some like 3x3 off of Apple Tree and just keep the torsion bars. He's gonna put a Honda V6 in this, so that's, you know, quite a bit more weight than the factory V-dub. So you were gonna have to add an extra shock or buy the heavy duty torsion springs anyway. He was willing to try and use my arms that I built. I built a jig just kind of using the tools I had and measuring off of the angles and everything from a Volkswagen. A jig to make my own trailing arms. I was actually looking to build trailing arms because I was gonna build my wife a buggy. And so the distances I came up with were just kind of out of, you know, thin air, but I kept the same geometry as far as like the outer pivot to the inner pivot, and I kept the same angles as close as I could. When you build your own trailing arms and you don't use a torsion housing, it's not super critical, all these angles, because you're just going to put tabs on there and square up the arms and level them. And so I'm not saying that's easier, it's just different. And this is the first time that we've taken a set of my trailing arms and bolted them directly to a torsion housing that was already existing there, and I kind of hoped for the geometry and everything to hold up. And surprisingly enough, I guess I did my homework good enough on my first jig, because they bolt up good. At full droop, they have, let's see, is it camber or caster? I don't know, the sideways thing. They both have about a degree of this, but at ride height they're almost 0 degrees. But it was the first time I ever put my trailing arm up to a torsion housing. The trailing arms always go off of how much wider and longer they are from a stock Volkswagen. And I can't remember what those numbers were, but we measured before and then we measured after, and we actually were able to get hard numbers. And my trailing arms are 6 inches longer and they're 2 inches wider to the hub. Now if you use adapter plates, because the micro stub hubs use a unit bearing and it has a 5 lug. You can get them for like it's a Chevy 5 lug or a Ford 5 lug. And the micro stub kits just come with an adapter plate. So they're 2 inches wider without the adapter plate. So when you add an inch of adapter plate, it makes it 3 inches. So my setup in a factory torsion housing is 6 inches longer than stock and 3 inches wider than stock, which gives you 6 inch overall because it's 3 per side. And like I was saying, if we would have just mounted the transmission and then we tried to run these trailing arms set up, that transmission would have been way too far forward. And it would have caused problems, especially on the CVs. Because the CVs do okay at compound angles, but you start losing droop angle the more forward angle it's got to be. And that's what we found. So even though these trailing arms are about 6 inches longer, we came up and found out that we only need to move the transmission about 4 inches back. And it has a pretty good CV and the CV angle. And the CVs aren't binding, so we've got the CVs in there. I've got them set where there's plenty, at the closest point, there's plenty of wiggle room. At full droop, they're not plunged out. And I've got them sitting at 26 degrees and they're not binding. So, whatever they're doing, they're getting those CVs are dry and it's getting 26 degrees. I'm happy if they don't bind at 24 degrees when I just buy the off-the-shelf 930 CVs. I use micro stubs on a lot of my projects. Both of my Audi buggies have micro stubs, which is just a unit bearing. You could have used a torsion housing and bolted in and just used the V-dub style bearings. The weight of the bigger engines is so hard on those wheel bearings. Ooh. Wardrobe change. Alright, I really should get a timer so I can see. The stupid camera turned off on me after 12 minutes. And I was just talking to air for probably another 20 more. So I gotta remember to look at that and make sure. So I think the last thing I was pointing out is we were talking about the trailing arms. How, I don't know what MP does to the CVs. Well, I kind of know what they do. There's more slop in the cages. Maybe it has smaller balls. But I can never get better than 24 degrees out of just an eBay 930. Gosh, I can't even remember the brand. Some German company that sells them. But these MP ones, I'm getting 26 degrees, no problem, no binding. So with my trailing arm setup, depending on the shocks he gets, we should have at least 15 inches of travel, which isn't amazing considering like modern side-by-sides, but that side-by-side was built in a factory and, made out of cheap Chinese parts. At least I'm making it out of the cheap Chinese metal and the cheap Chinese parts, but I've got the shifting all set up. The shifting, there's about a degree and a half in difference from the shifting rod to the transmission, which can cause a bind, and the fix for that really is to run U-joints. His transmission nose cone, it's a linear bearing nose cone, it's not a brass bushing, so his is going to shift just sweet. Originally when he built it with my dad, he was just going to use a factory V-dub pedal assembly, but times are changing. He has a Dune Buggie pedal assembly that uses the, you can get him the latest Rage or the MP. He's got the higher end one, and it'll work good. So it's a little bit easier to mount because you just need a flat surface. You drill 4 holes. I'm mocking up his front end. I've got his shocks up here. Set of Walker Evans off of some sort of side-by-side. I don't know which one. they'll mount up really well, and he'll have a full 15 and a half, 16 inches of front wheel travel. The only problem with these is where the hole's right there. We'll have to kind of be smart where we mount this reservoir. We probably won't do it to the tire. We'll probably rotate and mount it over this way. Don't know what the spring rate is. We can go over to my brother's house and measure the spring rate if we need to. They're surprisingly close in weight. Even though a Sandrail, you're using, you know, an automotive type engine, even with a car engine and a lot of car parts, the Sandrails do end up lighter. So we're usually about 500 pounds less than most of the 4-seat side-by-sides. But yeah, we're gonna do that. Get his front end mocked up. He's gonna put a rack and pinion on there. The stock bug steering, it does okay with the longer arms, but it's the passenger side long arm. It runs into the frame because your steering box is way over by the driver's side. So the fix for that is you either cut out the frame so that arm can go down, or you just put a rack in the center, and then it makes the arms even. And not to get too serious or sentimental on this, I don't feel obligated as much as I feel like I want to finish this. And it's sentimental to me that, you know, I can go through and I can work on that project that my dad worked on with Taylor. We've changed so much about how we build things, like even these front trailing arms. It's not that my dad didn't think something like this would work to cut and build our own trailing arms, and we've had really good success with this. I don't even know how many of these arms are out there just in the Samco buggy group. I remember growing up as a kid and thinking to myself that if I can get away from a fiberglass buggy seat, some suspension biuld seats in my buggy, I'll be so comfortable. Honestly, better suspension and better shocks far outweighs a cushy Corbeau or cushy biuld seat. Kind of the fun and neat thing about buggying is you're just asking a question with some metal and a grinder and seeing if you can answer it. So the best part is it's a lot of fun to test drive and answer these questions. We're really looking forward to getting it going. He set a goal for Sam Safari, which we're having, I think it's the 3rd week in April. It's where Samco group get together and we take our buggies and we go for a ride out in memory of my dad out in Little Sahara Sand Dunes. And I really want to get this ready for him, so I'm going to keep working on it. You know, if you made it this far in the view, thanks for watching, and look out for the next episode where me and Taylor tackle the front end and show all the glory of the link pin long travel. Thanks for watching.